If you're looking for a Google Trends API to scrape data on trending searches with, perhaps for hashtag or keyword research, then I'm going to show you my top pick for scraping massive amounts of historical data from the Google Trends API. Let's get started by going to Google Trends at trends.google.com. Then type in any search term to see the historical trends data. I'm going to use coffee to keep this family friendly as we start. And here we can select the country as well as the time period to show the data for. I highly recommend changing this. You probably don't want the past day. You probably want something like the past 5 years, in which Google Trends will show you weekly time resolution. This becomes important later on. And you can restrict this to categories if you have an ambiguous search term, but we won't cover that in this video. We'll scrape this chart in just a second, but I do want to point out for anyone new to Google Trends that this is relative interest, so it's always going to peak at 100 if you type in a single search term. So here, coffee peaked December 24th, 2023, roughly around Christmas time. If I type in beer, it's going to have a separate peak at 100. So these 100s are going to be specific to each search term until you compare them to one another. So I compare beer to coffee, one of them is going to spike at 100 and show us the relative popularity difference. So I can see for every single time span, coffee is more popular than beer and peaks here at 100. So all of the numbers for beer are now relative to coffee's top trending search week. Beer is not going to peak at 100 anymore. And we can see that coffee was a little bit more popular than beer 5 years ago, but it's way more popular than beer now. Beer, you better step up your game. And to scrape this data, I just click this button here and it downloads as a CSV file. For once, Google actually wants us to have this raw data. And I open this CSV in Google Sheets and I can now recreate my own graph of what we just saw on the Google Trends website. Pretty cool. And I can keep adding more search terms to download the relative popularity over time with that down arrow and scrape as many CSVs as I want from Google. Where this becomes tricky is if you have a large list of keywords you want to download the historical data for, like say a list of over 1,000. It's not practical to manually enter all of these in, which is why there's a Google Trends API that SerpApi provides and is my top pick. Link in the description. By the way, this is a freemium service, but they give you 100 free searches a month, which is pretty cool. Anyway, to use this, you put a list of search terms in this Q parameter and the API will give you back that raw data from Google. Specify your country in the geo parameter or leave it out, but I highly recommend specifying it. By default, you'll get back that time series graph I showed you before, but you can get back other data. Like if you want to get back the maps that are shown on Google Trends, you can do that. And the last parameter I want to talk about is pretty important. You probably want to specify the time range to get the data back from, so either 5 years, all, or maybe you want the past 90 days, 30 days, etc. So definitely pay attention to this date parameter. And depending on what you provide there will dictate the time resolution you get. So here I'm in the past 5 years and I'm getting weekly data back. However, if I change this to all from 2004 to present, it changes to monthly resolution. So you're going to lose the week by week data resolution if you change to all. So keep that in mind when making your selection. To start using this API, head to SerpApi.com. You can see they have a wide range of Google APIs. So they don't do just trends, they do Google search and a lot of other things. And as I mentioned earlier, they offer a free forever plan. You have to scroll down to find it. But it gives you 100 searches a month for $0. Once you sign up, you can use this playground here to interact with their API. You can see it sort of loading Google in real time. You can select your geographic selection here, so United States, and then it'll reload. That little kitten in the bottom left is doing its thing. So it seems to be loading up Google and then scraping the data directly from its loaded Google rendering, or maybe this is someone manually accessing Google for legal reasons. And we can see the data here is replicated on the bottom right pane in this JSON. Now, if you need help translating that JSON into a usable format, like a denormalized CSV you can ingest into a database, that's what my service does. Link in the description. You just need to provide your API key and we make SerpApi queries on your behalf and parse out the data into a more usable and downloadable format you can throw into your own database. I'll do a quick demo here with 3 search terms, plop in my SerpApi key, and this will count as one search towards my 100 limit, so keep that in mind when you use this platform. It is freemium, by the way. You can download up to 10 rows of data per day for free with my service. And to download a database-friendly CSV, look for this inner collection here that ends in values. You'll see a row for each search term here, and they're going to vary, and then click Download CSV. Here's the file in Google Sheets, so each row is going to be a search term and a week, as well as its relative popularity to the most popular search term, coffee, at Christmas time, as we saw. So these columns on the right are unnecessary. You can just delete them. You don't need them. And I just want to point out this format is different from before, where we had the search terms in the columns. So if we have a list of 1,000 keywords, we don't want a database table to have 1,000 columns. That's not a good idea. Instead, we have one column for the keyword, one column for the relative popularity, and another column for the time period start date. So back to querying the API, if you scroll down a bit, you can customize more of these options. We just use the default. So I want to make sure I only query the US, and we can set some of these other options here if we'd like to do more advanced things I won't cover in this video, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover them. Then here I want to get the past 5 years, so I copy this value here. Today, space 5 minus y. I don't know why they had to put it in that format, but whatever. And we can get the correct CSV. It just takes a little while because it's a little bit more data. All right, so now we got them and we can download them and be on our merry way and ingest them into our own database, assuming that's what your goal is for using a Google Trends API. But what if I have 1,000 keywords? I can only enter 5 at a time here. Just scroll up and look for this workflow here and import it. Now I can enter as many search terms as I want, 1 per line, so I can paste in a list of all 1,000 keywords. But if you're trying to save money, you're probably going to try to do 5 per line because it's the max SerpApi will accept. This way you use 1/5 of the search credits from SerpApi. But that's not going to be a good idea because remember, the data returned is going to be relative to each group. So when I do this next group here, Coke, Pepsi, Sprite, etc., those scores are going to be relative to whichever was the most popular. But anyway, let me just show you what will happen in case you don't believe me. So here I'm trying to stuff in as many keywords as possible. Then I paste in my SerpApi key, and then I add any other location parameters I want. I can also enter in multiple locations if I'd like. However, that will make additional requests and consume more of my credits. So instead of 3 credits, I would now be consuming 6 credits. So I'm just going to do 1 for now. And again, you can also set any of these other options if you'd like. And then here for time range, I'm just going to do the past 5 years as I did before. Now I just run this workflow and CFC Data will query the SerpApi and combine all the results together for me into a single CSV file I can ingest into a database. So here I can see it made 3 requests, consuming 3 search credits from SerpApi. Here are all the queries it threw in, and I can see the response sizes. It got quite a bit of data back from each request, and it combined it all together into this CSV file I loaded into Google Sheets. So column C maintains a reference to the input, so I have some idea of what the popularity score is relative to, but it's still not ideal in my opinion, so I suggest not doing it this way. So as you can see here, when I ingest this into a database, I'm going to have a column for the keyword, a column for the interest, and then a column for the time. And if this interest is relative to the group that keyword happened to be evaluated with, it's not super useful. Instead, I suggest just putting in 1 query per line. At least this way, your relative popularity is going to be isolated to each keyword when you ingest it into a database or do your analysis. So again, this is going to be a little bit more expensive. You're going to have to pay for each of these search terms 1 credit to SerpApi, but your data will be a little bit cleaner and more obvious to you when you're evaluating it in your analysis. So I hope you guys find this useful. This is really the only use case I could see you guys wanting to use an API for with Google Trends. If you need real-time access to the data, I would not recommend it. Think of something else because the API will get kind of flaky and fail on you. I was actually going to publish this video last Wednesday, but the SerpApi just stopped working for like an hour or 2 and I wasn't able to use it. Just to clarify, only the Google Trends API, not the entire SerpApi. So that's not a good sign if you need it to be 100% reliable. But if you need to do bulk scraping like I showed you in this video, hopefully you found the instructions and tools I have useful. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and have a wonderful day.